We all know what stress feels like, right? That constant nagging worry. But what if the solution wasn't some modern technique, but a really challenging prescription from an ancient text? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into just that, a pretty radical approach to the universal experience of worry.
Before we dive in, just take a second. Seriously, what's on your mind right now? A deadline at work? A family issue? Finances? The future? That feeling, that anxiety, that's exactly what our source material is going to tackle head-on.
Okay, so what's interesting here is that the text doesn't ease you in with, coping mechanisms or breathing exercises. Nope. It starts with a very direct, almost radical command.
And there it is. This is the core of the entire argument. Notice, it's not a suggestion, it's an instruction. Do not worry about your life. And immediately you have to ask yourself, is that even possible? What's so smart about this is how the text grounds this huge command in our most basic, everyday anxieties. It's not talking about abstract fears. It's talking about the fundamental concerns for survival: food, water, and clothing. The very things that can take up so much of our mental energy.
And then it hits you with this powerful rhetorical question. It's asking us to completely reevaluate our priorities. The core idea is that we get so caught up worrying about the sustenance for life that we actually forget the value of life itself. It's a really profound shift in perspective.
So, if we're commanded not to worry, what's the alternative? Well, the text doesn't just leave us hanging. It gives us an illustration by turning our attention to the natural world.
And here you can see the central contrast. On one side, you've got the human cycle of anxiety, all the sowing, reaping, laboring, and spinning, all of it driven by a fear of scarcity. But on the other side, the text presents this model of trust. It points to birds and flowers that are provided for, without all that anxious activity.
And this is really the punchline of the whole nature argument. It takes King Solomon, who's like the pinnacle of human wealth and glory, and says that the simple, effortless beauty of a wildflower surpasses all of it. The point it's making is that this kind of divine provision is superior to even the absolute best results of human effort.
So what does all our worrying actually accomplish? The text poses this really sharp question. Can any one of you, by worrying, add even a single hour to your life? That one unattainable hour frames anxiety not just as unpleasant, but as totally powerless and futile. It changes absolutely nothing.
Okay, so if the answer isn't to worry, what should we be doing with all that mental energy? This next section is the real pivot point of the whole passage. It shifts from a don't do this to a do this instead.
And here's the prescription. It's basically a two-step process, a cause and effect. Step 1 is to seek God's kingdom and righteousness first. And step 2, that's the promised result. All these things, the food, drink, and clothes we were just so worried about, will be provided. The core idea is that if you get your main priority straight, all the secondary things will fall into place.
Now, this kind of major reprioritization is naturally going to lead to a conflict, right? You can't put one thing first without putting something else second. This next section explores that very idea, that we all have to make a choice.
The text basically lays out two different places to invest our energy, our treasure. Earthly treasures, well, they're temporary. They're vulnerable to decay and pests and theft. But the treasures in heaven, these spiritual pursuits, are shown to be permanent and secure. It's a really clear contrast between what's perishable and what's eternal.
And this leads to a pretty deep principle of human psychology. Whatever you value most, whatever you pour your time and energy into, that's what will ultimately capture your heart, your emotions, your whole allegiance. Your focus literally determines the direction of your life.
This brings us to the final conclusion of that logic. The text personifies these two priorities as two different masters, God and money. And the message is crystal clear. You can't serve both. It claims they demand opposing allegiances, which means you'll inevitably end up loving one and hating the other. According to this text, trying to stay neutral just isn't an option.
So after all this big picture talk about kingdoms and masters, the text brings it all right back down to earth, with a very practical, manageable piece of advice for our daily lives.
And here it is, the final actionable takeaway. The antidote to all that overwhelming, future-based anxiety is to just narrow your focus. Don't borrow trouble from a day that hasn't even arrived yet. The instruction is to simply deal with the here and now.
Now, this isn't a call to ignore your problems. Not at all. In fact, it's a very realistic acknowledgement that today, right now, has its own set of challenges that need our full attention. It's all about concentrating our energy where it can actually make a difference, which is in the present moment.
And that's where this ancient prescription leaves us. It challenges us to let go of our anxieties about what might happen and instead engage fully with what is happening. So, we'll leave you with this question to think about. What would change? What would become possible in your life if you could truly stop worrying about tomorrow and just focus on today?